Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going to dig into the life and times of William Walker.
William Walker.
A name you might not know right off the bat.
Yeah.
But whose story has some wild twists and turns and really had an impact.
Yeah.
So to help us make sense of all this,
Absolutely.
we've got some great sources lined up for this deep dive. We're going to be looking at biographical entries, accounts of some key battles, and even a peek at how he's been portrayed in novels and film.
Mm-hmm.
So we can kind of see how his legacy has evolved over time.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to really uncover why Walker was more than just some ambitious adventurer. You know, his story, it's a window into this really turbulent period in American history.
Absolutely.
And the impact of Manifest Destiny, but it's also just a story with some pretty wild twists and turns.
What's fascinating about Walker is that he embodies the spirit of his time. This was the peak of Manifest Destiny. This idea that the United States was destined to expand its dominion across the continent, and perhaps even further. And this belief was deeply ingrained in the American psyche, influencing everything from politics to individual actions.
Okay, so let's dive into William Walker himself.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of a man full of contradictions, like this brilliant student, a doctor.
Right.
He was even a lawyer for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then he shifts gears, completely becomes a newspaper editor,
Wow.
a duelist,
Okay.
and then out of nowhere,
Yeah.
a filibuster. What exactly did that entail?
Oh, that's a great question.
Back in the 1850s.
Imagine yourself as an ambitious American during this era. You fully embrace this concept of manifest destiny. You're eager to expand. U.S. power filibustering offered a somewhat unorthodox avenue for this ambition.
Okay.
It involved privately funded military expeditions, almost a blend of manifest destiny and, dare I say, venture capitalism,
Interesting.
but with a much heavier reliance on gunpowder. These groups often comprise of individuals seeking adventure fortune. They would venture south primarily to Latin America,
Right.
aiming to conquer territories and ultimately bring them under U.S. control.
So it wasn't so much about discovering new lands, but more about taking land that belonged to others, fueled by this belief that it was America's destiny to control it.
Precisely. Manifest destiny was a powerful idea that many used to justify expansion, even if it meant violence and displacing others. It provided a moral and ideological framework for actions that, viewed from a modern perspective, appear undeniably imperialistic.
Right. Yeah.
And this brings us to an interesting anecdote that reveals a great deal about Walker's personality.
Okay.
There's an account of a duel he had with a fellow newspaperman named William Hicks Graham.
Okay.
Picture this, 2 men 10 paces apart armed with Colt dragoons, those massive old-fashioned revolvers.
Yeah.
Walker gets wounded in the duel, yet, incredibly, he misses every single shot at his opponent.
Wow, so he was in the duel and got wounded but missed all of his shots.
Yeah, he was.
That's wild.
It really speaks to his, I think, maybe overconfidence, maybe just lack of skill with firearms.
Yeah, it sounds almost symbolic of Walker himself. He
Yeah.
gets knocked down but doesn't back down.
Exactly.
This kind of reckless determination will be on full display as we see in his first attempts at conquest down in Mexico.
Right.
But I have to ask this before we go there. Was Walker motivated purely by greed in these ventures?
Yeah.
Or were there other factors at play?
While personal gain undoubtedly played a role, Walker's motivations were far more complex. He genuinely believed in the superiority of American culture and governance, and saw himself as a bringer of civilization to less developed nations. This, coupled with his ambition and perhaps a touch of delusion, created a potent mix that fueled his actions, his early ventures, targeting Baja, California, and Sonora, even declaring a short-lived Republic of Sonora.
Wow.
Reflect this. He gets driven back to California, faces indictment for violating U.S. neutrality laws.
Right.
Yet, incredibly, a jury acquits him in a mere 8 minutes.
Wow, that's astounding.
It's an incredible...
It speaks volumes about the level of support Manifest Destiny enjoyed, even when it clearly clashed with the law.
Yeah.
The fact that a jury essentially endorsed such actions is a potent symbol of the era.
Yeah.
But Walker doesn't stop there, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He shifts his focus to Nicaragua.
Right.
There had to be more to it than just another conquest, right?
Absolutely. Nicaragua wasn't just a random target. It held immense strategic importance at that time. This was before the Panama Canal or a transcontinental railroad.
Right.
The fastest route from the East Coast to California involved ships traveling to Nicaragua, then a land crossing, and then back onto ships.
Okay.
This transisthmian route was a vital trade link, and whoever controlled it controlled a crucial artery of commerce and communication.
And I believe that's where Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad tycoon, enters the picture, right?
That's right.
His company had a monopoly on that route.
Precisely. Vanderbilt's Accessory Transit Company held a tight grip on that crucial land route, and this, as you'll see, becomes a major source of conflict down the line. Walker arrives in Nicaragua in 1855, not with tourists, but with a small army of mercenaries at his command.
Oh, wow.
It seems safe to say he had a very specific goal in mind.
Yeah, he didn't go there to sightsee.
No, he did not.
Okay, so we've got William Walker. He's in Nicaragua. He's got an army.
Right.
Let's see what happens next when we come back.
All right.
So Walker arrives in Nicaragua with his army ready to make his mark.
Okay, does.
And he finds an opportunity in the ongoing civil war there between the Democratic Party and the Legitimist Party.
Right.
It's almost like he's stepping into this ready-made conflict, just waiting for someone like him to come along.
He is, in a way.
And exploit it.
You're exactly right. Walker and his men, many of whom were Southerners eager to expand slavery, essentially become guns for hire in this conflict. He aligns himself with the Democratic Party and quickly demonstrates his military prowess.
And he's surprisingly successful at first, right?
He is.
He scores some early victories and even manages to take control of Granada, the capital city.
That's right.
But then in a twist that I wouldn't have predicted, he gets recognized as the legitimate leader of Nicaragua, not by some revolutionary council,
Right.
but by the President of the United States himself.
It's a truly audacious move. President Franklin Pierce, influenced by Southern interests and swayed by Walker's promises of stability and potential for American expansion, formally recognizes Walker's regime for a brief, shining moment. Walker truly holds the reins of power in Nicaragua. It's almost like something out of a Hollywood movie.
Right.
The adventurer who becomes the president.
Yeah.
But this is where the cracks start to show.
Because this move, while it seems like a triumph, also sets the stage for Walker's downfall, right?
Right.
It's like he gets this taste of power and then he overreaches.
Right.
Makes some critical errors that alienate potential allies and create some really powerful enemies.
Precisely first, Walker decides to revoke Nicaragua's anti-slavery laws. Now, while this might have seemed like a savvy move to gain support from the southern U.S., it backfires spectacularly. It alienates many Nicaraguans and throws a wrench into his attempts to portray himself as a liberator. This decision, born out of political maneuvering, exposes the inherent hypocrisy of his claims.
And then in a move that seems almost like it's driven by just pure greed, he targets Vanderbilt's Accessory Transit Company.
Right.
Was this purely a power grab, or were there other motives at play?
It's difficult to say for certain, but the consequences are undeniable. By seizing the company's assets and handing them over to his allies, Walker essentially declares war on one of the most powerful men in America. And Vanderbilt, as we know, is not someone you want to cross. He retaliates with a vengeance, utilizing his vast wealth and political influence to undermine Walker's regime and finance the growing resistance against him.
So Walker finds himself facing enemies on multiple fronts. His decision to reinstate slavery has made him a pariah. In the eyes of many, and his actions against Vanderbilt have turned a powerful tycoon into a sworn enemy.
Absolutely.
And as if that wasn't enough, his presence in Nicaragua has started to unify the rest of Central America against him.
Yes.
It's like he's unintentionally awakened this sense of regional unity in his quest for personal glory.
That's a brilliant observation. Costa Rica, led by President Juan Rafael Mora, takes the lead, viewing Walker as a direct threat to the region's stability and sovereignty. Other Central American countries, recognizing the danger posed by Walker's ambitions, rallied to Costa Rica's side, setting the stage for some truly pivotal battles. These weren't just skirmishes. These were clashes that would determine the fate of Nicaragua and perhaps even the future of Central America.
And some of these battles, like the Battle of Santa Rosa and the Second Battle of Rivas, while they might just be names in history books, to many were actually turning points.
They were.
These were the moments when Walker's aura of invincibility began to shatter, and local resistance solidified into a formidable force.
Absolutely. Take the Second Battle of Rivas, for example. It's in this fierce battle that we see the emergence of Juan Santamaria, who would become a national hero in Costa Rica. The battle raged with heavy casualties on both sides. Walker's forces were entrenched in a fortified building, and the Costa Ricans struggled to dislodge them. And that's when Santamaria, a young drummer boy, volunteered for an incredibly dangerous mission. He would set fire to the building, knowing full well he'd likely perish in the attempt.
This story always gets to me, even in the midst of such chaos and violence.
Yeah.
Individuals like Santa Maria displayed incredible courage and selflessness.
Yeah.
His sacrifice helped turn the tide of the battle, and his story is still told today as a symbol of Costa Rican patriotism.
It's a reminder that these historical events, often reduced to names and dates, were actually filled with human drama and individual acts of heroism. Santa Maria's legacy lives on the main airport in Costa Rica, is even named after him. But sadly, the story takes a darker turn when we examine Walker's actions facing mounting resistance and dwindling options. He resorts to a truly desperate and horrifying tactic.
That's right. During the siege of Rivas, Walker orders the poisoning of the wells, leading to a cholera outbreak. Thousands perish, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
This act reveals a chilling ruthlessness, a willingness to inflict suffering on innocents to achieve his goals.
It's a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war and a dark stain on Walker's legacy. This act, along with his other missteps, eroded much of the support he had enjoyed, and remember, Vanderbilt was actively working against him, using his influence to sway American opinion and policy.
So the tide is turning. Vanderbilt is funding the resistance. Costa Rica is leading the charge, and other Central American countries are joining the fight.
Right.
Even support back in the United States is waning. What happens to Walker as this web of opposition closes in on him?
By April 1857, Walker's situation is hopeless, surrounded, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. He's forced to surrender to U.S. naval forces. He's sent back to the United States a defeated and disgraced figure. You might think this is where his story ends.
Right.
But remember, this is William Walker we're talking about. The man just can't seem to stay out of trouble.
So Walker is back in the U.S. defeated, but not broken.
Right.
He actually ends up writing a book about his experiences in Nicaragua.
I guess.
I can only imagine that he tried to spin the narrative in his favor,
Of course.
portraying himself as a misunderstood visionary,
Right.
rather than the ruthless figure he'd become.
You're exactly right. He attempts to reframe his actions in a positive light, particularly highlighting his attempt to reintroduce slavery in Nicaragua. Remember, this is just a few years before the eruption of the Civil War. And the U.S. is a powder keg of sectional tensions.
That's incredible. He's trying to capitalize on the very divisions that are tearing the nation apart.
Yeah.
It seems almost cynical using the looming threat of war to drum up support for his own ambitions.
It does.
What's fascinating is that he actually manages to launch another expedition. This guy's like a cat with 9 lives.
Right.
Always landing on his feet. But
Yeah.
I'm guessing this attempt doesn't go so well either.
Not at all. This time he sets his sights on Honduras, but his dreams of conquest are swiftly crushed. He's intercepted by the British Navy, who it's safe to say were not fans of his meddling in Central America. They hand him over to the Honduran authorities, who waste no time in putting him on trial.
And this is where the curtain falls on William Walker's story.
It is.
Right, no dramatic escape, no last-minute reprieve, just a swift trial and a firing squad.
That's right.
It's a far cry from the glorious destiny he envisioned for himself.
It is a rather inglorious end for a man who'd once held the presidency of a nation. But what's striking is how his defeat actually played a role in fostering a sense of unity in Central America. It's a bit ironic, isn't it? This American filibuster, intent on expanding U.S. power, inadvertently helped to bring together nations that had often been at odds.
It's an excellent point. It's like the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Walker, in his ambition and aggression, inadvertently created a common enemy that transcended these old rivalries. It's almost as if his actions unintentionally planted the seeds for a stronger, more unified Central America.
Precisely the threat Walker posed forced these nations to cooperate in ways they hadn't before. It's a powerful example of how even the most ambitious schemes can have unintended consequences, sometimes the opposite of what was intended. But Walker's impact extends beyond the political realm. His story continues to capture the imagination, finding its way into novels and films, even a rather surreal one starring Ed Harris.
Yeah, there's something about his story that seems to resonate, even if it's often romanticized or distorted.
Right.
But I think it's crucial to remember the brutal realities of his actions,
Yes.
the poisoning of the wells, the exploitation of local conflicts,
Yeah.
the attempts to reinstate slavery. These were not the actions of a hero.
You raise a crucial point. We can be fascinated by Walker's audacity, his ambition, his sheer ability to disrupt the status quo. But we must also grapple with the darker aspects of his legacy. He was a product of his time, a time when manifest destiny held sway and the exploitation of other nations was often seen as a right rather than a wrong.
Walker's story serves as a reminder that history is never simple. It's a tapestry woven from ambition, idealism, greed, and violence. It challenges us to think critically about the narratives that we're presented with,
Absolutely.
to consider multiple perspectives, and to recognize that even those who fail spectacularly can leave a lasting impact.
His story also highlights the interconnectedness of events, what might seem like an isolated incident. The actions of a single individual can ripple outward, influencing the course of nations and leaving scars that endure for generations.
So, what does this all mean for you, our listener? We encourage you to delve deeper into the source material we've provided, to
Yeah.
draw your own conclusions about William Walker and his place in history. Perhaps you'll uncover something we missed or develop your own interpretation of this complex and controversial figure.
And maybe this deep dive will spark your curiosity about other forgotten figures from history individuals whose stories, while perhaps not as dramatic as Walker's, offer valuable insights into the forces that have shaped our world.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the life and times of William Walker. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning. History is more than just dates and battles. It's a living tapestry filled with captivating stories just waiting to be discovered. And remember, as we've seen with William Walker, the past is never truly past. It echoes through the present, shaping the world we live in today.